Desperate man abandons dog and puppies in the forest, but days later an unimaginable miracle left everyone surprised. Do you know that feeling when it seems like the whole world is against you, but there's someone who makes everything feel lighter? For John, that someone was Luna, though she wasn't a person, she was his dog. A lively golden retriever with eyes that always seemed to understand him without needing words. John was never much of a talker. He was the kind of guy who worked hard and came home exhausted. After losing his father, it felt like a part of him was lost too. But then there was Luna. When he got home, there she was, wagging her tail as if to say, "Hey, you're not alone." They had a special routine. Every morning, Luna would drag him out for a walk. It wasn't just a stroll, it was a moment for John to breathe, feel some peace, and even smile, even when he felt like he had no reason to. The way Luna stayed by his side when he was sad was something special. She didn't need to do anything grand, just rest her head on his leg and wait. And suddenly, the weight he carried seemed a little lighter. Luna was more than a dog, she was the friend John didn't know he needed. She was always there, without judgment, ready for anything. And her puppies, they were the house's joy. Always bouncing, playing, and bringing that good kind of chaos that makes life feel more alive. To John, Luna was more than a pet. She was family. It felt like, in the midst of life's hardships, Luna was the one constant good thing he had. John was a dedicated man. He showed up early, worked hard, and always did things the right way. His job wasn't glamorous, but it was stable, and he took pride in keeping his life in order. When people talked about tough times, he thought, "This will pass, just keep going." But one day, without warning, the boss called everyone to a meeting. The room was full, but the silence was heavy. Then came the words no one wanted to hear: layoffs. "Unfortunately, we'll have to reduce our team." John's heart raced. He tried to stay calm, but his hands shook. When he heard his name on the list, it felt like a punch to the stomach. That day, he went home carrying a box of his things. The same home that always felt like a refuge now seemed enormous and empty. He placed the box on the floor and stood there, staring at it. Luna, as always, came running to greet him, wagging her tail. But this time, he couldn't even smile. The days dragged on slowly. At first, John tried to stay hopeful. He woke up early, got ready, and went out to hand out resumes. But every day he returned without an answer. Something inside him broke a little more. Luna stayed by his side, trying to cheer him up. She brought toys, wagged her tail, even made those little messes that always got a laugh. But John couldn't react. He spent hours sitting on the couch, staring blankly, wondering where everything had gone wrong. The savings began to dwindle, and the pile of bills on the table was a cruel reminder that time wasn't on his side. He looked at Luna and her puppies, and instead of feeling the love he always had, all he could think about was how he could no longer take care of anyone, not even himself. Sadness consumed him, and John began avoiding even the little things that once brought him joy. Walks with Luna stopped, and silence filled the house. Deep down, he felt ashamed. Ashamed of no longer being the man he used to be, ashamed of failing those who depended on him. John spent sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, his mind flooded with thoughts he didn't want to have. Guilt and despair seemed to compete over which would crush him more. He looked at Luna and the puppies and felt the weight of every bark, every innocent gaze. It wasn't anger. It never was. It was the fear of not being enough. He thought he was failing, that he could no longer give them the life they deserved. Then, on a grey morning, he made a decision that he knew would hurt but that he believed, deep down, was best for them. They'll find someone who can take better care of them, he convinced himself, trying to ignore the pain in his chest. He grabbed a big box, lined it with an old blanket, and called Luna. She came immediately, wagging her tail as she always did, trusting him in a way that only made things harder. He avoided looking directly at her, but it was impossible to ignore the shine in her eyes, the one that always seemed to say, "You're everything to me." John carefully placed Luna and the puppies in the box, his hands trembling so much he could barely manage. Luna sensed something was wrong. She looked at him, tilting her head as if to ask, "What's happening?" The puppies, innocent and oblivious, just played with each other. When he got into the car, the weight of his decision felt like a ton on his shoulders. The silence during the drive was broken only by the small sounds Luna made in the box. It was as if she was trying to understand what was going on. Occasionally, she would lift her head and look at John, who drove in silence, his eyes welling with tears. He kept trying to convince himself, it's for their own good. They'll be better off without me. When he arrived at the forest, John parked the car and sat there for a long time, unable to summon the courage to get out. The pain in his chest felt almost physical. Finally, he opened the door and took out the box. Luna began to grow restless, looking around, as if she knew something was wrong. He placed the box on the ground, in a spot where he knew people would occasionally pass by. He left some food and water near them, as if that could ease his guilt. Luna started barking, softly at first, then louder, as if pleading with him not to leave. When he took the first step away, she tried to climb out of the box, but the puppies clung to her, frightened. John looked back one last time, and what he saw shattered his heart into 1,000 pieces. Luna stood there, her eyes fixed on him, not understanding why she was being left behind. The puppies whimpered, huddled close to her. John couldn't hold back his tears as he walked back to the car. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if a part of him was being left behind. When he got into the car, he could still hear Luna's desperate barks echoing through the forest. He closed the door, rested his head against the steering wheel, and cried harder than he ever had before. Driving back home felt like carrying the weight of the world. The guilt crushed him, and the silence in the car was deafening. He knew he had done something he could never undo, and deep down, he wondered if he would ever forgive himself. Before we continue, remember to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you love animals and enjoy hearing their touching stories. Emily had a special way of observing the world. As a biologist, she spent most of her days in nature, studying and documenting everything around her. That particular day, the forest was peaceful, with the gentle rustling of leaves in the wind. But as she walked with her equipment, something broke the calm, a distant sound, a bark. At first, she thought it might be a lost dog, but as she got closer, the sound seemed more desperate. Emily stopped and stood still, trying to pinpoint the direction. Her heart raced when she realized the barking was coming from a more isolated corner of the forest. Following the sound, she carefully walked forward, dodging low branches and the crunching leaves underfoot. Turning a corner between the trees, Emily saw them. It was a sight she would never forget. A golden dog sat beside an improvised box with 4 puppies huddled next to her. The dog looked directly at Emily, but there was no anger or aggression in her eyes, only fear and, perhaps, a silent plea for help. The puppies whimpered, trying to hide beneath their mother, as she curled around them, shielding them from the world. Emily took a deep breath and approached slowly, careful not to scare them. "Hey, girl, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you," she said in a soft voice. The dog, who she would later name Luna, watched her every move as if deciding whether she could trust this stranger. Emily crouched down and stayed still, allowing Luna to sense her presence without pressure. After a few minutes, Luna stopped her low growling and relaxed a little, though she never took her eyes off Emily. Calmly, Emily reached into her backpack and pulled out a piece of bread she had packed as a snack. She tore it into small pieces and placed them on the ground near Luna, but not too close to frighten her. At first, the dog hesitated, but hunger seemed to overcome her fear. She cautiously stepped forward, sniffed the bread, and carefully picked it up. It was the first sign that there was a chance to gain her trust. As Emily observed more closely, she saw that Luna's collar was so tight it had caused wounds on her neck. The puppies, while seemingly healthy, were visibly scared and clung to their mother for safety. Emily knew she couldn't just leave them there. They had no chance of surviving on their own. After several minutes of patience and gentle gestures, Emily managed to get close enough to pet Luna. It was a moment of relief. The dog seemed to understand that this woman posed no threat. Emily carefully picked up the puppies one by one, wrapping them in a blanket she had in her bag. Luna watched closely but didn't try to stop her. Once they were all settled, Emily prepared to take Luna and the puppies back to her car. At first, Luna resisted, as if afraid of being abandoned again. But Emily kept talking to her in a calm and reassuring tone. You're safe now, I promise." In the car, Luna stayed quiet, her eyes fixed on Emily. It was as if, without words, she understood that something had changed, that maybe things were about to get better. Emily drove back home carefully, her mind racing about what had just happened. She knew that rescuing Luna and her puppies was only the beginning. They would need medical care, food, and, most importantly, patience to heal from the trauma they had endured. When they arrived at Emily's home, the biologist set up a safe space for them with blankets, fresh water, and food. She carefully examined each puppy, relieved to find they were all okay despite their ordeal. Luna, meanwhile, stayed close to them, refusing to leave their side for even a moment. That night, as Emily watched Luna and her puppies sleeping together for the first time in a safe place, she felt a mix of sadness and gratitude. Sadness for what the dog had endured and gratitude for being in the right place at the right time to change their fate. What Emily didn't know was that this rescue would also change her life in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Without Luna and the puppies, John returned home, but nothing felt the same. The silence that greeted him at the door was deafening. Before, as soon as he opened the door, he would hear the joyful sound of paws running toward him and see Luna, always ready to give him a warm lick. Now, all that was left was a void that seemed to consume the house. He tried to convince himself he had done the right thing. "They're better off without me," he repeated to himself. But deep down, he knew that lie wasn't even convincing him. The days began to drag. What little routine he had left slowly unraveled. Before, even during the toughest times, walks with Luna had been his anchor, his escape. Without her, he had no motivation to leave the house. The couch became his only companion, and hours slipped by as he stared at the ceiling or a TV playing on some random channel he wasn't even watching. The guilt was a constant weight. John replayed the moment of abandonment over and over in his mind. He saw Luna's eyes, her desperate barks, the way the puppies huddled next to her. Every detail seemed etched in his memory, like a film he couldn't turn off. He would start crying without warning, the tears overwhelming him with a force he couldn't contain. It was as if all the pain he had been holding inside had finally found a way out. As time went on, things only got worse. He couldn't keep up with the bills, and shut-off notices began appearing on his door. First, the electricity was cut, then the water. He sold whatever he could, but the money never lasted. The house, once his refuge, began to feel like a prison. The lingering smell of food Luna had left in the kitchen, the forgotten toys of the puppies, everything seemed to scream what he had lost. When he was finally evicted, John grabbed a few clothes and left without looking back. He had no idea where he was going, and, honestly, he didn't care. Wandering the streets, he became almost invisible to the world. People didn't notice the man walking with his head down, shoulders slumped under the weight of his guilt. Occasionally, he would pass someone with a dog, and it was like a punch to the gut. He would think of Luna and wonder if she was okay, if the puppies had found a safe place. Each night on the streets was a new test. The cold, the hunger, and the loneliness were unrelenting. He began to question how he had sunk so low. The man who once had a home, a job, and a loyal friend by his side now had nothing but regret. John felt like he was sinking into a bottomless pit, and the only thing echoing in his mind was Luna's gaze on the day he left her behind. Sleeping on park benches or taking shelter in store entrances, John started to notice something he hadn't realized before. It wasn't just the absence of Luna that was destroying him. It was the absence of himself. He no longer knew who he was, and worse, he didn't know how to begin finding himself again. The only thing he was certain of was that without Luna, the world felt much darker and emptier. Months passed, and John's life remained in shambles. He survived as best he could, taking odd jobs that barely paid for a meal, while guilt and loneliness followed him every step of the way. It felt like the man he once was had disappeared, replaced by someone he barely recognized. But fate, in its unexpected way, was about to put something, or someone, in his path. It was just another day when John, desperate for some distraction, decided to volunteer for a community effort to clean up the forest. He didn't have much to offer, but he thought it might at least keep him occupied for a few hours. Dressed in simple clothes and a pair of old gloves, he joined the group of volunteers with little expectation. As he walked through the forest picking up trash, something caught his attention. It wasn't just the sound of footsteps or distant voices, but something more familiar, a bark. His heart skipped a beat, and he stopped in his tracks. No, it can't be, he thought, trying to push the idea away. But the sound came again, clearer this time and closer. He followed the sound, as though something was pulling him toward it. And then, through the trees, he saw her. A woman was crouched on the ground, playing with a group of dogs. John could hardly breathe when he recognized who was there. Luna. His Luna. She looked healthy, her coat shiny, her eyes bright, and that same gentle expression he had never forgotten. Around her, the puppies were bigger now, playing and tumbling over one another. It was as if time had frozen in that moment. John stood paralyzed, unsure of what to do. A mix of relief and shame washed over him. He wanted to run to her, to hold her, to apologize for everything, but he also felt like he didn't deserve to be there. Luna seemed happy, cared for, and loved. And who was he now? Just a broken man who had failed her when she needed him most. While he wrestled with his thoughts, the woman, Emily, noticed his presence. "Are you okay?" she asked, noticing the confusion on his face. Before he could respond, Luna noticed him too. For a moment, she froze, simply looking at him as if trying to recognize him. Then, suddenly, she ran toward him. John fell to his knees as Luna reached him. She began sniffing him, hesitating for a moment, then placed her paws on his shoulders and licked his face. He couldn't hold back his tears. "I'm sorry, Luna. I'm so sorry," he said, the words spilling out between sobs as he hugged her like he would never let go. Emily watched the scene, not entirely understanding what was happening but sensing there was something profound between the man and the dog. She approached carefully and asked, "Do you know her?" John, still holding Luna, nodded silently, unable to speak in that moment. He knew he needed to explain everything, but for now, all that mattered was that Luna was there, alive, healthy, and, incredibly, still seemed to trust him. Shame still consumed him, but for the first time in a long while, there was a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could have a chance to right the wrong that had haunted him for so long. After that unexpected reunion, Emily couldn't take her eyes off John. There was something different about him, a weight, a pain that seemed etched into his every movement. She watched how he held Luna, as though trying to mend something that had been broken a long time ago. But at the same time, there was a gentleness in his gestures that made her want to understand who this man really was. Emily decided not to ignore what was happening. With Luna by her side, she approached and asked again, this time more firmly, "You know her, don't you?" John hesitated. He knew he couldn't avoid the truth, but he also didn't know where to start. Finally, he took a deep breath and said, his voice trembling, "Yes, she was mine." Emily frowned, confused, but she waited for him to continue. I abandoned her. And the puppies too," he confessed, the words coming out as a whisper, heavy with regret. He couldn't bring himself to look her in the eyes, but he could feel the judgment he expected from her. "I didn't want to, I swear. I was desperate, no job, no money. I thought it was the best thing for them, that someone else could take care of them better than I could." Emily, surprised, remained silent for a few seconds. She looked at Luna, who was sitting beside John, as if she still trusted him despite everything. "You really think leaving a dog and her puppies in the middle of a forest was the best thing for them?" she asked, her voice stern. John closed his eyes, feeling the crushing weight of his guilt grow heavier. "No. I know it was wrong. I've thought about it every day since. I hate myself for it. But at the time, it felt like the only thing I could do." Emily crossed her arms, trying to process what she had just heard. On one hand, she felt anger. How could someone have the heart to do such a thing? But on the other hand, looking at John, she saw a broken man, genuinely remorseful. Luna, as if sensing the tension in the air, rested her head on John's knee, something Emily had never seen her do with anyone except her puppies. "You understand what you did to her, don't you? It's not just the abandonment. It's the fear, the trauma. She and her puppies barely survived. If I hadn't found them, Do you know what would have happened? Emily said, her voice still filled with emotion. John nodded, tears streaming down his face. I know. And I'll never forgive myself for it. But please, let me do something, anything. I want to try to make it right. I want to show her that I never stopped caring. Emily sighed, still hesitant. She knew Luna seemed to trust him, but that didn't erase what had happened. I'll give you a chance, John. But not for you, for Luna. She deserves the best, and if you truly want to prove you care, you'll have to work for it. Her words were harsh but fair. John nodded, determined. I'll do whatever it takes. Just tell me what to do. And so, Emily decided to allow him to start reconnecting with Luna and the puppies, but with one condition: she would always be nearby, watching every step. For John, it was more than he deserved, but it was the opportunity he never thought he'd have again. As he walked alongside Emily and Luna that day, a small flicker of hope began to grow inside him. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for redemption, and to regain the love of the friend who had never stopped trusting him, even when he had failed her. The first few days were difficult. John desperately wanted to rebuild Luna's trust, but he knew it wouldn't happen overnight. Emily was clear. He had to prove he was committed and genuinely wanted to do the right thing this time. She allowed John to visit Luna and the puppies, but always under her supervision. At first, Luna remained cautious. While there was no aggression, she kept her distance, as if she needed time to be sure she could trust him again. John began helping with simple tasks. He fed the puppies, cleaned their space, and even assisted Emily with other animal care duties. He did everything patiently, respecting Luna's pace. Slowly, she began to warm up to him. First, she accepted the food he offered. Then, she let him pet the puppies while she watched closely. And one day, she rested her head on his hand, just as she used to. It was a small gesture, but to John, it felt like his heart was finally beginning to heal. As the days passed, the bond between John and Luna grew stronger. He even started joining Emily on environmental projects, helping rescue other animals in need. These experiences brought something new into John's life: purpose. He wasn't just trying to make amends with Luna. He was finding a way to turn his pain into something meaningful, helping other animals who, like her, needed a second chance. Luna also changed. She seemed more confident and relaxed, as if she knew that this time, John wasn't going anywhere. The puppies, now playful and full of energy, loved having him around. They jumped on his legs, tugged at his shoelaces, and ran around him as if they were part of a big, happy family again. For John, every small step forward was a victory. He knew he could never erase what he had done, but he was determined to dedicate the rest of his life to ensuring Luna and her puppies never felt fear or abandonment again. And with each passing day, he felt like he was reclaiming more than just Luna's love. He was regaining his confidence in himself. Emily realized that Luna and John's story had the power to inspire and change perspectives. She organized a community event to share their journey. The goal was simple: to raise awareness about the importance of caring for animals and to show that even the worst mistakes could be repaired with genuine actions. The event took place in a central park, with animal adoption booths, educational talks, and activities for children. But the highlight of the day was when John, accompanied by Luna and her puppies, would take the stage to share their story. He was nervous, not because he feared judgment, but because he knew he had to be completely honest about his mistakes. When his turn came, John took a deep breath and began to speak. He talked about how Luna had come into his life and helped him through his darkest times. He shared the loss of his job, the pressure, and how desperation had driven him to make the worst decision of his life. He described the abandonment, the crushing guilt, and the emptiness that consumed him afterward. I thought I was doing the best for them, but the truth is, I was giving up. And that almost destroyed not just them, but me too. There was silence among the crowd. Some people had tears in their eyes, while others seemed to reflect on their own lives. Then, John began to talk about the second chance he had been given, thanks to Emily and, most importantly, Luna's unwavering trust. He shared how he started helping with the puppies, working on environmental projects, and how those experiences gave him a sense of purpose he had never imagined. Luna, sitting by John's side, seemed to understand the significance of the moment. When he finished speaking, she stood up and placed her paws on his lap, as if validating every word. The audience gave a standing ovation, not just for the story, but for the message of hope and transformation it carried. After the event, something incredible happened. People began volunteering at shelters, others offered to adopt animals, and many families promised never to abandon their pets. John and Luna became a symbol of resilience, empathy, and the importance of never giving up on ourselves or those who trust us. Inspired by the impact of his story, John decided he wanted to do more. With Emily's help, he started a small dog walking and pet care business. His goal was to help others build deep connections with their animals, just as he had with Luna. Today, John and Luna are inseparable. The puppies grew up and were adopted by loving families, but Luna never left his side. She is more than just a dog to him. She is the reason he found himself again. Now, every walk they take together serves as a reminder that even when we make mistakes, there is always a chance to start over, as long as we are willing to fight for it. In the community, John is no longer just a former volunteer or the man who shared his story. He is someone who inspires others to be better, with animals, with people, and with themselves. And above all, he is living proof that second chances can transform lives, both ours and those who depend on us. Thank you for watching the video until the end. Remember to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your opinion about this story in the comments.